Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about Last Epoch. Now, Last Epoch is an up-and-coming RPG that is currently in, I would say, late beta phase. It is also developed by 11th Hour Gaming, and I just want to point out that this is not a sponsored video. I have no affiliation to them whatsoever. I just kind of wanted to try on something new. I was kind of a little bit burned out of PoE, so I wanted to either go Grim Dawn, but I thought, why not check in on Last Epoch? I'm actually a long-time Last Epoch player. I have like, I don't know, 500, 600 hours in the game currently. I haven't played for over a year though, and there is a lot of changes and a lot of good stuff in here. So we'll kind of just give my opinion overall. Is it worth to buy? Because it does currently actually cost $35 to buy. Although what I will say is there's currently no MTX shop or anything, so once you buy the game, you have it. And as for stash tabs, you can buy them with in-game gold. There is no like monetization after those $35 as of this recording. Also, just for people who don't usually know who I am and who are just here for Last Epoch, I'm usually a Path of Exile streamer, so we'll draw some comparisons to Path of Exile. If you're a Last Epoch main, I'm really sorry. Those are just kind of my experience with it. Obviously, I'm going to be biased towards certain things. What I can tell you is that I love Last Epoch so far. I love it for very different things than PoE. I was very excited once I kind of got into the groove, and once I kind of saw that this is not just a PoE clone, it has a lot of fresh ideas for the genre in general. But let's get into what I actually liked about the game. Now, before we get into what I liked and what I didn't like, I want to quickly give you an overview of what the game is about. But it's going to be very brief. I'm not going to explain the whole game, just kind of what you can look out for. Now, number one, there's 5 classes in this game. So number one, you have the Acolyte, which is the base class, and then you have like subclasses, like in PoE Ascendancies, for example, right? So you have the Necromancer, the Lich, and the Warlock isn't released yet. But basically, you have like Necromancer, which revolves around minions, and Lich, which revolves around like poison and like self-harm, stuff like that. Then you have the Primalist, which basically revolves around Beastmaster. This is like companions, which is a little bit different than minions. You have Shaman and you have Druid. Shaman is basically your elemental caster. Druid is kind of like your HP stacker, like more of a tanky boy, right? You have your Sorcerer class, which is more like, you have Mage, right, which is Sorcerer, which is more like spell-based, Spellblade, which is more like melee. Then you have Rogue, which has Blade Dancer, Marksman. Falconer isn't out yet. Basically, Blade Dancer is more like a melee, like dagger kind of style, like more like assassin style. Marksman is bow, right? And then you at the end, you have your Sentinel, which has Void Knight, Forge Guard, and Paladin. This is kind of like, I don't know, just different damage types. All of them are kind of tanky. So this is more of your melee class. This is the item window. As you can see here, you have your typical items for an ARPG that you can itemize in. The itemization in this game is actually awesome, and we're going to talk about that real soon in the what I like section. You also have an idle section where you basically can just specialize your character a little bit further. It's kind of like charms if you from Diablo 2, right? Then you have your inventory. As for stash tabs, you can actually buy all your stash tabs with gold right here. I bought a lot of them. And if you're a hoarder like me and you're from PoE, you're actually going to pay a lot less if you're just paying like $35, right? Because in PoE, the stash tabs will go to $100 really quick if you want a lot of them. In this game, I have like 40 stash tabs or something, and you don't have to pay anything extra. Then we have our health globe, our mana globe. We have all our skills down here. Now, something interesting in terms of itemization and character customization is it has Last Epoch has number one a passive skill tree like PoE has, but it's kind of split. So you have your subclasses. For example, I'm playing a Primalist right now, and I can decide whether I want to be a Beastmaster, a Druid, or a Shaman, right? So first up, you have your main passive tree right here. This is the Primalist passive tree. And then depending on what you want to specialize in, you have different other passive trees. You can go in every single passive tree, you can go up to the halfway mark and spec into these points right here, but you're locked out of the rest. Only your main class, you're actually going to be able to get up here, and those are usually where the biggest buffs are. Now, not only that, but you actually have a skill tree for every single skill that you can have. So basically, you can have 5 skills at once, and you can kind of like customize them right here. Now, the thing about this is it's not just like small bonuses. You can completely rework how your skills work, which is actually very, very exciting. We're going to talk about that later a little bit more. But yeah, you can also get plus 2 gem levels on your gear. As you can see here, my wolf is level 25. Everything else is level 20. So far, very ARPG-like, very cookie cutter, it looks like. But let's look at what this game actually does different and what it does well. Number one thing I love in this game is the crafting system. Now, when I say I think this is the best crafting system I've ever seen implemented in an ARPG, I mean every single one. I also mean Path of Exile. I absolutely adore this crafting system. Now, we have to talk about this more with actually the second point, which is this game actually makes it so you care for rare and magic items, which is really, really hard to do in RPGs. This is actually going to overlap with why the crafting system is so good. But number one thing, basically, when you get into the crafting system, you have tier 1 to tier 5 mods that you can craft with regular crafting, right? So every rare item can have 2 prefixes, 2 suffixes, right? So here's your prefixes, here's your suffixes. Easy enough, right? So now if you want to add an extra suffix right here, all you do is you click and you add whatever you want. So this is very, very reminiscent of how Harvest used to be, right? Basically targeting mods that you want. Now, you might think this is too easy, but it actually isn't, right? So for example, I can put on health on melee hit right here, and then you have glyphs and runes. I'm not going to go too much into detail here. This is not a guide about it. This is just like an opinion piece, right? But basically, you can add affixes however you want, and you can upgrade them up to tier 5. Now, why this is so genius is because you can make it so players can actually get the mods that they want without too much frustration, but they don't get like a lot of it. If you want the actual upgrades, you're going to have to grind, but you're going to get the baseline of your item. You're not going to grind forever until you get, for example, melee health leech or whatever. Whatever you need on your item, you can very easily get. There's also forging potential here, which is kind of like the throttle, right? Like the breakpoint where you just can't improve your item anymore. Once you have 0 forging potential, you can't craft the item anymore, right? And then it's basically done. You have a lot of ways to kind of circumvent that. You have a lot of ways to play around with your item. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. But basically what I want to say is this plays into the second upside of what Last Epoch does well, and that is that it incentivizes you to look at rare and magic items. Now, how does Last Epoch actually manage to do that? And that is just simply by having a solid crafting system. Because in this game, you actually have first find an item and then you craft on it. You don't just craft it from scratch, like for example in Path of Exile, right? If you go to the shop here, let's say I buy like a white item, like this one here, it's gonna have like no forging potential. If you wanna get 4 T5 mods from scratch with 16 forging potential, it's impossible, right? It is actually impossible. So the way this game does it is you're actually going to farm stuff, you're going to pick up rares, and then you're going to approve upon them. So for example, you're going to have an item that maybe already has like 3 of the mods you want. You put on the 4th mod, you increase the tiers a little bit. All well, right? This is actually incredible. And it goes even further than that, because the way that this crafting system works is the mods that you want, you can only get them if you have these shards right here. So as you can see here, I have quite a bit of shards, right? But for example, if we go for the more rare ones, which I can't see right now, I think I would have to put in something like maybe the relic here, right here, right? If I put the relic in here, I can't craft this anymore, but just to show you real quick, you have level of certain skills, right? These are very, very hard to get. I have like 10 plus of each, right? So it's not a lot. If you want to get those, you actually have to pick up stuff like magic items and rare items. Because, and this plays into why magic and rare items are actually worth looking at and worth picking up, is because you have Rune of Shatterings. So the way you get these shards is you can find them randomly, but usually it's going to be very, very hard to find the ones you want. But you can do Rune of Shattering, and what happens is you're going to sacrifice a rare or magic item, and you're going to get the shards that are the mods on the items. For example, here I'm going to get a random assortment of shards from all the mods here, right? So for example, I do Rune of Shattering, and I get like shards from all of these mods. So if you find a magic item with +2 levels, you can shatter it and you're going to get plus of levels. And this is just such a genius way to kind of combine the crafting system with actually being hyped about gear on the ground, right? Like not just caring about currencies, actually caring about items. Now you might say, well, that's all good, pal, but I don't want to look at rare items on the ground. It's fucking obnoxious. I don't want to identify stuff all the time. I don't want to look at them. Well, there you go. You have an in-game loot filter. Point number 3. So since all the items in Last Epoch drop already identified, right? So you already see all the mods they have on the ground. You can actually get a loot filter that will filter out rares for you for the mods that you want. And you can do that very specifically. You don't need any third-party stuff. You go here to gameplay. You go to manage loot filters, right? So this game has an inbuilt loot filter. And you can do everything that, for example, you can do in PoE on a third-party website, right? And you can go even further, right? You can look and you can actually go for rare items, target specific rare items that have exactly the mods you want, or like 2 out of 3 of the mods you want, whatever. You can customize it very, very thoroughly right here. And this is something that I always wanted for Path of Exile, and that isn't really possible because of how you have to identify rares and stuff. So this is, I think, something that PoE has to address eventually, but I think this is a huge step in the right direction for Last Epoch. A lot of fresh ideas. So these 3 basically intertwine with each other. Why itemization in this game is actually awesome. Now, it doesn't stop there, though, because on top of rare and magic items, there's also exalted items. So exalted items are basically just rare items where one mod has more than 5 tiers. So, for example, this is a tier 6 mod, and that's actually quite strong, right? So you can have up to tier 7, but tier 6 and tier 7 mods you can only find on the ground. You cannot craft them, right? So what happens is when you're going towards very, very end game is you're going to want exalted items. You want to find exalted items, right? That have like 1 or 2 mods that are exalted that you want, that you really, really want. There are tier 6, tier 7, and then you want to craft the rest. And this just further means that it's even going to be more amazing to find items from the ground. So this is just, I think overall, this system is fucking awesome. I can't really say anything bad about it. I absolutely love running maps or endgame, we're going to talk about it, and actually having meaningful loot on the ground that doesn't just result to, I don't know, Chaos Orb that you're going to trade with somebody. Actual loot, I love this. Next one, legendary items are awesome in this game. So number one, I wanna make this clear here. There's a difference between unique items and legendary items. So unique items is the one you see right here, the Fang, for example, right? So this is basically just, as you would know, uniques from they're like build enhancing, right? Very interesting items. You can't craft them, blah, blah, blah. But there's also legendary items. And basically the way this works is you can make a legendary item out of a unique item once you beat a pretty damn hard boss, one of the hardest bosses in the game right now, maybe the hardest. You basically get an altar where you can upgrade a unique item with an exalted item. And this is a very, very interesting system. So basically exalted items, once again, are these like higher tier rare items, right, that we saw earlier. So the way this works is, for example, here, I have 201% increased minion health, and it's kind of like in this red writing, right? And that's because this was not on the item originally. I actually upgraded the unique to get that stat on top. And the way you do that is you have a unique item. So for example, I have like this unique item right here, and let's take any exalted amulet, right? I can't do it right now because I'm not at the altar, right? But what I could do is if this unique has legendary potential, right? I can combine it with a exalted amulet, and I can actually get stats from that exalted amulet on my unique amulet. Now, the way legendary potential works is you can have 1 to 4 legendary potential on an item, with 4 being basically impossible for most items. So I haven't seen a single 4 potential legendary item, unique item yet, right? So it doesn't really happen. What that would mean is I would combine these 2 items and I would get all of the mods from the exalted item because it has 4 LP, 4 legendary potential. You get all the mods. If you had 2 LP, you would get randomly 2 mods from the exalted item you're combining with the unique item. Now, I don't want to go too in deep and I don't want to confuse you too much here, but basically this is a very interesting way to do end game scaling because they have an effective level for legendary potential. And what this number here means is the higher the number, the less likely the unique will actually get legendary potential. So what they do is the uniques that are already extremely strong, they will have almost no chance to get more than maybe 1 legendary potential, right? But with leveling items or early game items, they can often reach 3 to 4 legendary potential. So what you're doing in essence is you're making some of these very early game uniques actually viable for end game. You're actually making it so if you have a 4 LP leveling item, it might actually compete with a very, very good unique that has like 1 LP. But yeah, that system you have to actually have played the game to understand. I just want to say that the upgrade from uniques to legendaries, I don't know how to say this, but these 4 just play together in such a harmonious and awesome way. I was really, really stunned how well they did it. Next up, let's go into endgame systems. So the endgame systems in this game have a lot of potential. Some of them are already really, really great, and some are showing signs of being great, right? So number 1, you have the monolith system. The monolith system is basically like in Path of Exile, your mapping system, right? Kind of like after you're done with the campaign, you're doing the actual campaign, right? Or you playing through the game or whatever you would call it, right? These are actually like storylines. You can do upgraded version, you can do normal version. Once you complete one of these monoliths, right, that are basically just maps, basically just maps, you get a blessing that gives you certain things, right? So for example, it gives us extra unique drop rate, which is really, really strong. And these have roles, right? So you can complete the monolith over and over and get actually bonuses which are global. They're not just for the monolith, right? Which is really, really cool. So there's even character customization put into that. I guess like similar to how PoE does, I guess, Atlas passives, right? To give you an incentive to actually complete those. Now let's real quickly look over how this system works. So if I go into here, I have the option to do normal. So once you have finished your campaign for the first time, you just do the normal ones. You have to play through all of them, and then you have the chance to do them legendary, which is going to give you a lot of extra bonuses. So for example, let's look at this, right? So if you have played Synthesis in Path of Exile, like the Synthesis League, this will remind you of something. But in general, how this works is you have corruption up here. Corruption basically makes this whole setup a lot harder, but gives you more returns. So you get extra rarity, extra quantity. Let's put me to the side here for a second. And basically, if you look at this, you're starting here, right? And then you're basically going outwards. And the farther out you get, the more bonuses and the more loot you're going to get. And the way they do these maps, number 1, maps don't cost anything, but number 2, they have very specific rewards. So if you hover over this one, for example, you can see it gives us extra experience. If you look over this, you get extra runes, right? If you look over this, you get a set item at the end. Basically, you get a chest at the end. You get idols, whatever. So you can actually target farm stuff. You can target farm gold. And you basically go further and further. I don't want to go too in-depth with this, but this is a pretty cool idea. It gets a lot more complex once you get on the outer skirts of it. I think there is still a lot more to be done with this system, but it already feels like something I could grind and something I did grind. Now, number 2 thing you have is dungeons. Basically, these are dungeon keys I farmed over quite a while. I didn't do too many because at the time where I played, the dungeons weren't fully out. The uniques you could drop from the bosses weren't out. But basically, right now, there's 3 different dungeons that you can do, and they have very distinct playstyles. So for example, I'm here at the Temporal Sanctum, and we talked about legendaries earlier, right? The way you upgrade uniques into legendaries is doing this dungeon, and at the end, you can upgrade them, right? You get the altar. So basically, if we put in the key, right, we have 4 different things here. We have level 55, level 80, level 95, level 100. They get a lot harder. Just to show you real quick, I'm going to go into here. Now, this dungeon is about like swapping in time. So you can swap around in time. For example, here you see I can't further progress, right? But then it tells me to click shift here. And if I click shift, I basically travel in time, right? So now this dungeon revolves around that mechanic. So for example, it might be that I can't get through here, but if I swap in time, I can go through here. So this is basically a really cool concept, in my opinion, that basically goes up to the boss. So the boss itself also plays with this kind of like mechanic. So the other dungeons have something very similar, where basically it's not just a normal map. It actually wants you to do stuff differently, which I find very interesting. As of this recording, there's only 3 dungeons, so I'm definitely hoping there's going to be more and more. They all have their distinct boss uniques that you can hunt for, right? Which is really cool. Overall, dungeons I really like. The third thing is arena. Arena I'm not going to show. This is basically your run-of-the-mill. You have waves of enemies coming at you. There's also Arena of Champions, which is a little bit different, but those are basically not the styles of gameplay I love. I really hope they're going to do more with it over time. We're still in beta, so there is still time to refresh that. But between monoliths and dungeons, I will say this game already has enough endgame to where I don't get bored. But be sure to note that I have played only around about 150 hours during the last 2 weeks or something. I've had a lot of fun with endgame. It did not feel stale. And once again, the reason why it didn't feel stale is because these things are all checked. It's actually fun picking up stuff from the ground. So you don't even think about like the grind too much. Now, the last thing I want to mention here is this game already feels like it's not, I wouldn't say finished, but it's already a game. So way too many games nowadays kind of feel like they get pushed out and then gradually upgraded over time, kind of like scamming you at the start and slowly morphing into a good game. This is not one of these games. This game in its current state feels more completed than most games when they come out, and it's still in beta, right? I don't know when it will get released. I don't know when you're watching this video. I just want to say that I really, really appreciate what they've done so far, and I really love this game. Oh yeah, something I forgot. The devs seem really, really awesome. They seem really, really engaged with the community. They really care. They always answer stuff. If you go into their Discord, they're going to answer stuff. They seem really awesome. And I think that having awesome devs and smart devs that have good ideas, it's just everything, right? Like, talk about money, talk about investment. If that is not right, usually the games don't go very well, in my experience at least. So that is a huge upside as well. Now, starting with things I did not like. Number one, the mana system is, in my opinion, pretty atrocious. Now, I did write here Sorcerer is cringe, and the reason for that is Sorcerer has a really, really bad playstyle, in my opinion, in this game. That is kind of like an overarching problem that I see with how Last Epoch wants us to play the game. What I mean by that is this game really wants you to press more than one button. It really wants to incentivize you to branch out and have different skills, right? Which is cool on its own. Number one thing, this game does not do Mana Flask. It does not have Mana Flask. And that means that obviously there's no cheap way to just get back your mana. I think that I actually like that, right? I think Mana Flasks are just lazy design. Stuff like PoE just to circumvent that kind of thing. They have other uses for mana, right? Like aura reservation, stuff like that, mind over matter. But this game here does it differently. It just says, no, we're going to use mana as a balancing tool, which on its own is a pretty cool idea. But what happens in reality is you're going to have a skill that is kind of just there to refill your mana, kind of just has the function of refilling your mana. For example, in Sorcerer, that's focus. On Blade Dancer, it's like some kind of like basic attack style attack that deals like almost no damage, and you just use to get back your mana quickly, right? So your playstyle revolves into something that's kind of weird, right? It's like spam your cool skill and then press focus and stand there to get back your mana, right? That is a very extreme example. There is ways to reduce the mana cost a little bit, but not really. And now you might say, well, just get some mana regen, but that's where we get into the problem even more, because mana regen in this game is kind of scuffed. Because you might say, well, they don't give us Mana Flask, but I mean, they're obviously going to give us tools to get more regen, right? To actually sustain our main skill. Well, not really. They really want to hammer it in that you have to use shitty skills that nobody wants to play, like standing there with focus to get back your mana, or auto-attacking basically to get back your mana, which kind of defeats the purpose, right, of interesting design style. You have these interesting abilities that just cost too much mana, and then you have to cost other abilities that are just like bad gameplay wise. They just kind of feel bad to play, and you don't even give us much like tools to get more mana regeneration. Just real quick, the way mana regen works is you have a certain base mana regen. I'm actually not sure if it's like 8 or 10 or something. I think it kind of changed at some point, but there's a base mana regen. You cannot increase that base mana regen. You can only get percentage regen, but percentage regen is pretty damn hard to get. For example, here, a single point gets you like 2%. On an item, you can get like up to 30-ish% or something. And the problem with the itemization with mana regen is prefixes are usually damage, right? So now you have to sacrifice a damage mod for mana regen. Basically, if you want to get mana regen on all of your gear, all you're going to do is like increase your mana regen from like maybe 10 to 20, which is almost nothing, right? It seems like a lot, but if you're spamming some of these skills, they have like crazy mana costs sometimes. You can't really make your skill work. Even if you sacrifice, I don't know, like 30% of your damage, you're still not going to be able to sustain some of these skills. Now, some classes handle this better than others, but that's just because they have less mana cost, right? They have more just like, or their minion playstyle. You don't need to cast that much, right? But some of the, like, Sorcerer just is kind of the worst, because Sorcerer, the way Sorcerer works is it kind of incentivizes you to get, I don't know, to get to a certain maximum mana. For example, these nodes here, values of the adaptive spell damage you get is tripled if you have 200 max mana, right? There's other stuff like that with like 300 mana, whatever, doubled effect, tripled effect, right? So it wants you to get a lot of mana, but you don't get more base mana regen. So you're going to stand there with fucking 400 mana and you're still only going to have 10 mana regen. What are you going to do? How are you going to sustain that? You can't, right? So I mean, it should go without saying that the more mana you have, the more mana regen you get. Kind of like in PoE. I just don't understand really the playstyle they're going for. I feel like these builds are really, really uninteresting, which is also one of the reasons that I've mostly played minion builds or skills that can just sustain themselves. Obviously, there's certain builds that don't need that, right? I'm not going to pretend like Sorcerer is only this, but if you have like, for example, a kind of like mastery or like a class, right, that has so many high cost skills, I would at least think that you're going to give us like, I don't know, like for example, in the passive tree here, you have like passive bonuses that only count if you're Sorcerer. I would just double our mana regen here. I don't understand what's the problem. In some classes, once again, the mana problem is not that big of an issue. But in stuff like Sorcerer, it really comes out badly. I really didn't have a lot of fun with Sorcerer whatsoever because of that. Blade Dancer kind of feels similar. It feels kind of cheap sometimes. But yeah, I think this could be addressed. I really hope it will be addressed. Give us more. The incentive is already there, but give us more tools to fix mana, please. Or at least, if you have some kind of interesting way to give us back mana, maybe don't make it a skill that I have to stand there for 4 seconds, or maybe don't make it, yo, I have a basic attack here that I have to do for 3 seconds before I can start having fun again, right? That's just all I wanted to say. Number 2, the map in this game is confusing as hell. So let's look at this real quick. Number 1, this game revolves around time traveling, right? So for example, in the Ruined Era, you have the same kind of like places to go to than in the Imperial Era, right? And then you get more and more places you can go to, but the old places also are still there, right? Because you're just traveling in time. Interesting concept, right? Well, let's look how you're supposed to see anything here. Like, let me just zoom out here. How are you supposed to know where to go? Now, just to be clear, for the quests, they do have some kind of like system where you just right click it and you know where to go. Overall, I'm going to say, I think this is really, really confusing. To be fair, it looks beautiful, right? It looks really, really beautiful. But if you let me zoom out like this and I can't even see what's going on, I think this has to be improved. But this is obviously just a minor nitpick, but still something that will be really, really hard for new players. I've played this game before. I kind of know where everything is, and I'm still having problems sometimes. For example, if you want to look up where the dungeons are, etc. I think this mini-map needs a lot of improvement in terms of visibility. And last but not least, and this might not be much for a lot of you guys, the animation sound design feels a little bit dated or weak. Basically, what I mean with that is, in this game, a lot of the sound design doesn't really feel that crunchy. It doesn't feel as impactful of hitting enemies. Now, this game has come a long way to where it was like a year before when I last played it. I will say that, so they're definitely on the right track there. But it just doesn't feel as impactful, for example, as like a Shatter in Path of Exile, or as like certain skills when you hit an enemy, which you might not think is that important, but it actually is if you play over a long period of time, in my opinion. And if you care about graphics, I honestly don't care about graphics that much, but I will say that this game can feel plastic at some points. That's probably just because they don't have enough budget yet, or they just, I don't know, it's not on their number 1 list, right? They want to get the base game going, and they're going to steadily improve the animations before release, or maybe even after release. That's totally fine, just something you have to look out for. If you're looking for a beautiful game, it isn't really there yet. There's also not that much care or detail in the environmental stuff, right? Just some observations here. Obviously, this is kind of nitpicky, right? But I know a lot of people do care about that. I care about the core gameplay. I just kind of had to include it here. Oh yeah, one more thing to point out. Multiplayer as of this recording isn't really out yet, right? So for now, you're on single player. Now, this could be like, I don't know, 3 months from now, if you're watching this video, this could already be out, because we're right now on patch 0.8.5, and 0.8.9 is going to have multiplayer. So it might already be out whenever you're watching this video or whatever. But basically that means we don't really know how trading is going to work. Now, they have said a few things about being kind of hands-off, just wanting to put out very basic trading. They don't want to give us many tools, which I certainly don't think is like the way to go. I think that once you get an economy going in a game, you might as well go all the way and give people the tools they need to trade, because otherwise Discord is going to do it, third-party programs are going to do it, and you're going to have the same situation as in PoE, right? I think that, for example, them going for a in-game loot filter is awesome. I wish they would do the same thing with trading. That's something I hate about Path of Exile, not having, for example, in-game loot filter, stuff like that. I really hope they're aware that you just cannot like half-ass trading. You have to go all in. You actually have to give people the proper tools to do so. Oh yeah, one more thing I forgot actually. In the downside section, game seems a little bit too balanced right now. This might be like a weird thing to say. This is more like a trend and not really something that really annoys me all that much. It's just a trend that I've seen. So over time, I feel like they want to balance the game more and more like tightly. They're removing some of the more like, let's say, problematic nodes from like passive trees, and then want to make everything more streamlined, it almost feel like, which I'm very much against. One of the biggest thing I love about the ARPG genre, or about like ARPGs, is figuring out interesting stuff, figuring out broken stuff. I think stuff like that has to be in games for them to be interesting. And this is where the differences for me between a PvP and a PvE game come in. This game is balanced around PvE. So if you have a broken skill, you're not destroying somebody else's day, right? By having a good build, right? You just fix it next patch, let people have their fun, right? If you have a PvP game, obviously, I mean, if there's like one way to play the game, it's going to be annoying, right? What I'm saying basically is, please don't fall into the pit trap. If any devs are watching this, please don't fall into the pit trap, in my opinion, to make a game too balanced, to not have stuff to figure out that's actually broken, even if it's just for a month and then you're going to fix it. Let people experiment. I've just seen more and more of these nodes kind of being toned down that are very interesting to play around. I just hope you're not monotonizing the whole gameplay experience. I think this game can be like PoE in that regard. It can be very, very exciting to figure out new stuff, but it feels like you're kind of trying to tighten the grip of making stuff a little bit more streamlined. Just a trend I've seen. Maybe I'm just imagining it. Just something I wanted to throw out there. So in conclusion, what I think about this game, I think this game is worth the $35 right now. I love this game. If you don't care about beta games, sure, wait for multiplayer, wait for the release. I get it. Some people are just not like into beta games. I will say that I'm not really into beta games usually myself, but this game doesn't really feel like a beta game. So whatever floats your boat. What I will say is this game has great itemization, a solid end game as of right now, huge improvements every time I revisit. I'm really, really excited every time I come back, because there's new things to see. Quite a lot of overhauls every single time. They're really learning from their mistakes. One thing I have to point out once again is, I also said that in my downside section, there is annoying playstyles in this game because they don't give you mana regen. They don't give you mana regen at all, which I understand. They want to go for more of a Grim Dawn style where you have to use several skills than like PoE where you're just a one-button build. I understand, but make it less annoying is basically what I'm saying. I get it. It's different than PoE. It's different enough to where this is standing on its own foot. I really, really like that about this game. It learns from PoE in a lot of ways, but it doesn't really just follow in its footsteps and makes like a verse version. So yeah, I'm very, very excited for when multiplayer comes out, for when this game releases. You can bet that I'm going to be playing a lot of this game once it comes out. One thing I also want to mention is that the devs said they want to kind of like time it so PoE players do not have to like choose between Last Epoch and Path of Exile in the first month or so of a PoE league. So they're going to time it correctly, which I'm really, really happy for. Also, this game has already a lot of good content creators, so I'm going to link a few down in the description down below, because obviously when I dip back into the game, I need a little bit of catching up, right? And then I watch certain channels. Obviously, there's way more out there. If you're not linked in there, I'm really sorry. I just picked a few that I enjoy personally. But yeah, really promising game. For me personally, it's already good enough to be purchased. Depending on whether you want multiplayer, whether you want a full game, right? A full release, you might wait. But for me personally, this game is worth a purchase. But that's it for the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe. As always, huge shout out to my Twitch subscribers and my Patreons. I couldn't do stuff like this without you. Thank you so much for the support. And yeah, had a ton of fun with this game for the last 2 weeks or so. I was kind of burned out with PoE, so having this really, really invigorated my love for ARPGs in general. I will say that Grim Dawn and Last Epoch are just a lot of fresh air for the genre. There's not too many good ARPGs out there right now, in my opinion. So every single entry that actually does new stuff, that actually does interesting stuff, is much appreciated. But with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.